Hey friends, thank you for joining me again today. My name's Dan, and I'm finally, much too slowly in my opinion, I'm finally finishing this portrait. As I said yesterday, I feel like I used to do this kind of thing, I feel like much more quickly, but then again, I'm quite sure I'm doing them better now than I did, a couple of years ago when I was doing them more quickly. So there you go. Portrait of three great-grandmothers and their grandson. It's a montage. These women were never in the same room in this orientation. I took separate photographs and arranged them in Photoshop. And to tell you the truth, since it's right here, so I arranged it in Photoshop, printed it out. This is the print, but then I took gouache and did quite a bit of painting on the print, and then scanned this back into Photoshop, in my computer, into Photoshop, and tweaked this again. And that's what I sent to my client. And this is the tweak of that. I'm not using that much. Turns out I didn't use it much at all. Anyway, here I am. I'll go back up to the very first day I started this. You'll notice that the gaps between each of the heads is considerably, the heads are compressed together considerably compared to the montage. And I talked on the first day about, is that a mistake or is that an improvement? Well, in my opinion, clearly it's an improvement. But still, I did it intuitively, so in a sense, it's a mistake, if you know what I mean. I was trying to copy that, but I didn't. Instead, I made it a better painting. Again, I think intuitively. Anyway, there is some question. Could these three bodies actually cram this close together so that all their faces... nobody else will ever wonder that except me, but I do wonder that. But I think it's close enough. All right, so this painting is done enough that yesterday I signed it. This is pretty typical for me of any painting, any kind of painting. I quote unquote in my work log yesterday I wrote down finished painting. But this is pretty typical. Final finishing touches. I could call this done. I could send it to my client. The one face that needs the most corrections, ironically, is this one. And this is, of course, he's the star of the show. This is the one face that I really want to get correct. But before I get to that, let's go ahead and do some finishing touches. But before I do that, let's go ahead and get official Daily Art Adventure number 957, finishing touches on a 4X portrait. Mark, set, go. I have, before I started the broadcast, I went ahead and mixed up just an assortment of flesh tones. Nothing scientific, just warmer, redder, warmer, cooler. There's my pile of red-black that I've talked about the last couple days. Hello, Uncle. Thank you, man. So, finishing touches. I'm just being... This is all dry. Ironically, I don't know if it's irony, but this is all dry. But yesterday when I painted this train toy and the fabric down here, evidently I didn't add enough liquid to it, so this is wet. And I just mentioned that because, well, first of all, because I don't want to put my hand in it, this or that. So that is not dry, which means this is medium slow dry down here. And again, the reason I'm mentioning that is if I were to do another glaze over this part of the painting, I could, in my correct opinion, I could not use a fast dry liquid, because then I'd have fast dry on top of slow dry. That's what cracks. Okay, so if I were to do another glaze at all, I would use a much slower drying medium, Neil McGilp. I actually do have a bona fide slow drying medium downstairs in my studio. but I don't need to glaze this, so that's just a teaching point, moot point. I'm not going to worry about it at all. But just want to point out, if you have part of your painting that dries slow, don't use a fast dry medium on top of that. All right, let's get then. Here's the face I want to work on the most. But before I get there, let's just do some final checks on these three ladies. I will get there, I promise. I'm just going to say, first of all, I am quite happy, especially with this face. That, in my opinion, that's a good painting right there. They're all good paintings, but this one really, I accomplished with, I would say, great economy of stroke. This right here really makes me look like I'm a good painter. And so I'm happy with that. The others, not so much economy, got the job done, have a likeness. But this one is just, again, the best expression is economy of stroke. But let's come in here and check some things. So I'm being fussy on myself. It's time to be fussy. There's a little bit of highlight on this side of her lip. I've got this side pretty well, but not this side. See that bright pink? I guess I'm zoomed in as far as I can go. This face is intentionally darker than the photograph. The photograph is bad. Do you understand? Just like, and again, I'm not complaining about the photograph. Most photographs from which we paint are quote unquote bad. Okay, so I'm not going to copy the value of that because that would be a mistake. I'm still not completely convinced about her nose. This line right here. Yep. Okay, so there's, I could almost make a punch list. Start making a list of things. Lip, nose. This rim of her glasses right here. Do you see how heavy that is compared to this? So let's thin that up. These are, in my opinion, so far these are very minor things. I love her hair. I like her hat a lot. I might do the especially her top lip, the right side of her top lip should be a little bit lighter. I might do that. But of course the eyes is where it's at. I think I have opened her eyes, a thousandth of an inch, quote unquote, just almost an imperceptible. But I think she looks a little bit more bright-eyed here, which is a good thing. All right, I think that's all. That's fussy enough. Let's do these. I already have a pale pink mixed up. Let's see if it's the right color. And for these kinds of changes, folks, I'm going to be painting the wrong way, if you catch my drift. So this is not a time for painterly strokes or interesting marks. This is a time for tiny details, tiny corrections. Yeah, that's better. Now let's look at, well, I've got a pinkish tone on the brush. Her top lip on the right, that's too light. Hang on. Her top lip on the right side of it should be slightly lighter. Part of the reason is because in her face, the light's coming from the upper right. Ironically, on all the other faces, the light's coming from the left. We talked about that the other day. But will anybody notice that? And no, only a fellow painter would ever notice that, and even then. Because of her position of her face, it's even arguable that she's catching a different light. In my opinion, that's arguable anyway, that conceivable. There's a little tinge of red right here in the corner of this eye. This was not on my original list a minute ago. And that was the wrong color. It needs to be darker than that. So I want Now, many of you, if you're an artist, you'll see that, especially for me, using this particular technique, it's not the only way I do oil paintings or portraits. I mean, it's not the only way I do portraits, but I started out in oil, drawing in oil. I started out with what I call my Rembrandt approach to flesh tones, which earthy flesh tone, earth tones underneath, and then more color on top. Clearly, I am very conservative, especially in this technique. I tend to be very conservative coloristically. There's no chartreuse, purple, blue, not much, not much. I have a little blush of fuchsia here reflecting off her dress on the side of his head. I made that up. And I have a little bit of blue in here, above and below her eyes and on the side of her cheek. But other than that, it's pretty, I'm being pretty conservative. Even right now, by adding this red, I'm trying to increase the color interest in the painting a little bit. All right, enough of that. I'll save this. That's my red brush. At the moment, I'm using all bristle brushes. I have some sable brushes down there ready to go on this guy. But as long as as much as possible, try to hang in there and use bristle brushes instead of the soft synthetic or sable brush. I'm fixing her nose. That's good. Now, here's okay. Good. Oh, when I say good like that, that means I'm seeing a mistake. I'm seeing an error. And happiness, as a portrait painter, happiness is seeing your mistakes, because then you can fix them. The irritating part of doing a portrait is when you cannot see what's wrong. All right, so I just discovered that the shadow under her nose, all the way around, is too intense, too dark, too contrasty. Oh, there we go. There we go. That's what an improvement right there. It was too outliney. Got that fixed. Yahoo. All right, now let's fix this. Her glasses are too, the frame is too thick over here. Let's thin it up. There we go. Now, anything else? Yes, this. Now, as you may know, you could drive yourself batty, absolutely. And that's what hyperrealism is. That's what superrealism or photo, whatever you want to call it. You can just continue down the path I'm on right now, like forever, and almost never finish. Just keep getting more and more accurate, realistic, and so on and so forth. And of course, that's the way early journey painters should paint. If you haven't heard me say this before, let me say it now. Okay, the curl on the top of her nostril, that shadow is too big, too dark. Let me back up. So you could keep going down on this trajectory, so to speak, forever. You just keep. Was there a problem with that? You bet there is, because the further you go down this path, you lose energy. The painting loses the human touch. The marks become more and more pedantic, more stiff, you're obliterating interesting marks. So that is what there's a balance. There's a huge issue. There's a balance between realism. There's a tension, even is a better word, a tension between realism and interesting marks. Okay, and so if you do what I'm doing now forever, nah. Now let me back up and say, in my opinion, the ideal artist's journey is you spend the first half of your journey learning how to paint stuff that looks like stuff. Ooh, I've got a crease over here that's way too dark. Look at that one right there. So let's lighten that up. It's still there, but it shouldn't be that dark. All right, in my opinion, the ideal journey is you spend the first half of your art journey learning how to paint stuff that looks like stuff. Then you spend the second half. Not everybody transitions to the second half, and that's okay. You know, maybe they're doing exactly what they were put on the planet to do. So I don't have any beef with people who don't do it. But most of us, most of the artists I admire, you know, the two gods, small g, in my pantheon, are Rembrandt and John Singer Sargent. I could add to that Sargent's contemporary, Zorn, Swedish, I think, Z-O-R-N. That if you just Google Zorn, he may have been as good as Sargent. Sargent became way more famous, but Zorn is pretty famous in his own right. In fact, one time I think they did a head-to-head competition, and I think the legend goes that Sargent, so to speak, threw his brushes down and walked out. That may be legend, but anyway, that's a fun story. That's right. Not many of us are going to look with scorn upon John Singer Sargent. If you do, something's wrong with your judger. Anyway, I mentioned those names because they are, you know, examples of what I call, well, I'll call this time the second half of our art journey. First half of art journey, you learn to paint stuff that looks like stuff. Second half, you learn, she's done by the way, you learn to paint stuff that looks like paint. Kind of, forgive me, a clever way of saying it. Another way to say it is that in the second half of the art journey, the marks themselves become paramount, become more important than the realism. And I don't think I have to say to you that I'm concerned about realism. Yeah, let that sink in, okay? Especially with portraits. But the brush strokes themselves are my primary concern and focus. All right, let's look at this lady up here. I opened her eyes noticeably, but not so much that my client will freak out and say, wait a minute, right? I don't want my client to even notice. I would like my client, which is all four of these women, I would like them to each look at themselves and say, oh, I look pretty good. Now, and what I'm going to get is, because I know what it's like to be not this old, but my age, is they're going to look at it and say, ooh, I look that old. So it's kind of a losing proposition in this case. I want them to be lovely. These are, you know, the beauty of age is what I'm trying to reflect here. The nobility, the strength, you know what? I digress here. I digress. My wife and I have been talking about this a little bit lately. And I'm trying to decide how philosophical and historical to get on this. I'll start at the practical level. And everybody who's my age or older will instantly recognize the reality and the truth of what I'm about to say. And I'm going to start by saying harsh things about young people. Not too harsh. I was young once myself. Young people, it's part of being young. Young people, I have no idea how difficult it is to get somewhat advanced in years and to be a healthy, functioning, I don't mean healthy physically, although that's part of it. Have no idea how hard it is to reach old age and to still be a good person. I'll say it that way. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, that phrase comes to mind. Life is hard. I'll be a little bit more intense. Life is hard as hell. I don't mean that literally, I'm just using in the colloquial sense of the word. Life's hard. And if anybody, so I'm looking at these dear women. I can't tell if they're functional or healthy, but they look, pretty healthy. They get the benefit of my doubt. I'm inclined to think, okay, probably. And young people, and I'm thinking it's people under the age of 40, have a natural built-in pliability, bendability, flexibility in their soul. Besides in their body too, but in their soul, they have the ability to fake it. Frankly, until you're 40-something years old, you can be leading a very dissolute lifestyle and still often give the impression that you're doing okay. But the stuff starts to hit the fan, typically in the early 40s. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because. And again, forgive me, I'm going to get philosophical, historical here a little bit. I am a philosopher who paints, not a painter who philosophizes, in case you wonder. My master's degree, and I am not thus because of my education. No, I have the education because I am thus, okay? My master's degree is largely historical philosophical. Not art. I didn't get a master's in art. Isn't that interesting? Now, if I had to do it all over again, I might choose a different path. If I'd known I was going to end up this way, I might have said, well, let's just stay in the art world, shall we? But anyway. I find this particularly. All right, so I'm sorry, I'm not even talking about what I'm doing. A little bit of highlights mostly. I haven't done any dark interface yet. I've been intrigued here lately, partly because of the current socio-political moment in which we all across the Western world, in which we find ourselves right now. And I've been intrigued by the term progressive, the progressive movement, and I've done some reading. I'll tell you, there's a book by Paul Johnson called Intellectuals, or The Intellectuals, I think it is. Fascinating book, fascinating, and very, very fun reading, even though it's ostensibly kind of a, academic or brainy book. It's really not. I shouldn't say that. Anyway, if you want a interesting read, he wrote it about 30 years ago, as I understand it, but very much still. It's his historical book about the intellectuals. He starts with Jean-Jacques Rousseau, goes through all the shining lights of the Enlightenment, basically. And I've been intrigued by this term progressive. Come to find out that the word progressive, like the way it's used in our media and culture and politics today is actually essentially the same way it was used by Jean-Jacques Rousseau 250 years ago. I think the term progressive originated with the French Revolution. I think I'd have to check on that. But it was certainly a term that was used in that era. Okay, hang on just a second. Let me see if let me not get carried away talking and forget my painting here. Just a minute. This crease has gotten too dark, so let's fix that. So in my research, I've discovered, I've been lecturing on modernity for I was going to say for decades. That's not quite true. 15 years I've been teaching on the modern impulse, the modern movement, modernity in the philosophical sense of the word. When a philosopher says modern, he doesn't mean I've got the latest, greatest modern, phone or watch or something, or running shoes. No. For a philosopher, modern actually means old-fashioned. It's a particular era of Western civilization that we have gone through and are going out of right now. That's why our culture is in such a state of upheaval. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It is because we're making a 500-year shift from one era of mindset thinking history to another. So I'm going to say about that right now. But three terms, let me give you three terms. Modernity, and I'll define that in a minute. Enlightenment. Modernity started 500 years ago. There's my hand. The Enlightenment started half of that, 250 years ago. And the Enlightenment and progressive. So in my writing lately, I've been calling it the Mod-Lightenment progressive. Modern Enlightenment, Mod-Lightenment progressive thinking. Those terms all overlap with each other. I'm going to get back to the old people thing here in a minute, so bear with me. I'm reminded of it even as I paint these deer and strong. I mean, I don't know about you, but those all look like strong women to me. I love it. So Mod-Lightenment progressive. I've come up with some new descriptions of the modern worldview, modern thinking. I've been saying for years that okay, hang on just a second. I think I'm done with her. Oh, one tiny exception. I want a little bit of a reflection on her glasses up here. Okay, I started out by saying what young people don't know is how hard it is to get old successfully. It's easy to get old. All you have to do is stay alive. And it's easy to get old, crotchety, grumpy, broken, maladjusted, sociopathic. That's easy. Yeah, that's easy. To get old and crotchety, that's the natural human trajectory. To get old successfully is quite difficult. That's, again, young people can't possibly know that. But they could observe. All right, here's one of the characteristics of Mod-Lightenment progressive thinking. This is where it's going. The age of modernity, which again goes back 500 years, was an over-exaltation of the rationalistic aspect of the human person, animal, creature, okay? It's basically thought that we are essentially, our essence is our mind. Our essence is our thinking capacity. All right, hang on. Oh, and look, I messed up this. I think there's only one thing that I need to do on this woman, and it's over here. I need to create a little differentiation here between her cheek and her ear. I'm missing a little notch right there. All right, so where was I? Oh, defining modernity. Modernity, the modern worldview is that humankind, human beings, are essentially, that is their essence. That's a very important word. Not that they're good at thinking, but that is the essence of the human creature. And someone would say, well, what else could it be? And the answer is a whole bunch of other things. I'll jump all the way to the most radical and pertinent. Is man essentially a thinking creature or a loving creature? Loving includes thinking. Thinking does not include loving. You know, I've tipped my hat way over to where you can begin to see where this might be going. The opening salvo of the Enlightenment, of the, modern era was Rene Descartes. Remember, you all learned this in Philosophy 101 if you went to college. Some of you, a few of you might have gotten it in high school. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. That's where modernity began, so to speak. What if he got it wrong? What if he had said, I love, therefore I am? Or even, now some of you are thinking, oh, you're just being all sentimental. No. I'm speaking like a philosopher, not like a writer of pop songs. Okay, so, and they call it puppy love. I'm trying to think of something from the 50s, you know. I'm not an aficionado of pop music, but anyway, no, I'm not thinking, it's not that kind of love. Anyway, I'm not going to defend myself in that regard any further down that path. What if he got it wrong? What if he should have said, I am loved, therefore I am, instead of I think, therefore I am. Anyway, a very important description. And besides, I've described the over-exaltation of the intellectual capacities of a human being. There's a corollary to that. And this became, in a way, you could say the Enlightenment, which started half an eon. If the age of modernity started 500 years ago, the age of enlightenment started half that, 250 years ago. And the way to understand it is the Enlightenment is modernity on steroids. Okay? And by the time we get to the Enlightenment, one of its characteristics becomes extremely obvious. And it's not only in my opinion, over-exaltation of the rationalistic capacities, but it's not simply, I am a brain, I am a mind, but it's me and my mind insular. Nothing but me and my mind will do everything. All right, hang on a second. Let me pause there and talk about this little guy. He has the most mistakes in him. Of course, he's the star of the show, so I really can't. And I'm going to tell you, first of all, right off the bat, it looks to me like his nose is too wide. Now, some of you know this. I printed this out after I did much of this painting. So in Photoshop, I arranged to have this print the same size as my painting. I didn't go the other way around. This is not the same size as this. It's the other way around. I painted this first and then printed this to match that. That's a long story. That's all I'm going to give. So I can use this to measure this. And let me show you just a little trick. Some of you remember back in elementary school or college, whatever, this is a compass, and this is actually a divider, sort of like a compass, it's just a point on each end. I'm going to start out just using the divider. First of all, let's measure his nose here. Wing of nostril to wing of nostril. Whoa! I am right, so this is way too wide. Now let's measure inside each nostril. I'm a little bit too wide there. A little bit. Let's do inner corner of nostril. That's just about right. All right, so according to my calculations, this nostril must be a little bit too long. No, I know what's wrong is this wing of this nostril is too wide. You see? Can you see that? That the thickness there versus here? Like, whoa! And how about over here? This one's not so bad. No, that's about right. Is there anything else now in this nose? The shadow is actually a little bit too faint here, so I can darken that. Let's put my finger there and see if it looks right. Looks better. Whew! All right. And I've completely forgotten where I was in my discussion. Some of you are saying, yay, I know. Some hold your breath. Those of you say, stop philosophizing and paint. Yeah, well, there's plenty of other people that'll do that for you. I don't really want to trigger people, quote unquote. I really don't. But in the course of talking intelligently, if you get triggered, I'm sorry, that's your fault. That's your problem, not mine. I'm going to be who I actually am. So in the Enlightenment in particular, which was modernity on steroids, this attitude became militant, very, very prominent, strong, dominant, militant. It was me and my mind alone, independent of anybody else's. I can do everything. I can answer the great questions of existence. Where did I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? And I can control my destiny. And that control my destiny is a major element in the Enlightenment hierarchy of values. I am captain of my own ship, captain of my own destiny. I'll paddle my own canoe. And in case you didn't see this coming, here's a corollary to that, or a very, very critical part of that. The Enlightenment mind has bluntly speaking, a disdain for all previous wisdom, for all handed down wisdom. So there is built into the mod Enlightenment progressive worldview, modern Enlightenment progressive, not synonymous but very much overlapping terms. There is built into the mod Enlightenment worldview a very strong, and you can't be a mod Enlightenment progressive without subscribing strongly to this worldview. There is within the mod Enlightenment progressive worldview a strong, and that word is too gentle actually, a militant disdain for the wisdom of the ancients, the wisdom of old people. There is built into the mod Enlightenment worldview a strong disregard for the wisdom of parents, for instance. If you read, as I have been doing in Paul Johnson's book, if you read the biography of Karl Marx, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, all the way down the list, I can't remember all the people it's essentially the biography of about 15 people. That's what the book is. Every single one of them had major and horrible, bloody, so to speak. I'm not speaking literally. I'm speaking figuratively. Horrible, violent, and vile breakups with their parents, and that's what's become a surprising revelation to me in recent months as I've been observing the world scene. Those of you who are my age, you remember an earlier a manifestation of progressive thinking in the 60s. Do you remember? Don't trust anyone over 30. Do you remember that? That was actually a chant, a mantra of the progressive, the riots, if you will, the protests of the 60s. Don't trust anybody over 30. Now let me hasten to say, there are indeed a lot of people over the age of 30 whose lives are not worth emulating. There are a lot of people over the age of 30 whose lives are a train wreck. If they are your parents, you respect them. You don't emulate or imitate them, but you respect them as your parents nonetheless. But there are, on the other hand, there are many people over the age of 60 or 70 whose lives are worth emulation. And that is precisely, so the modern Enlightenment worldview is me and my mind alone, insular. I am insulated from the wisdom of any handed down wisdom. I reject it. And okay, I want you to know that. Why do I want you to know that? I don't know. It's just because I'm a teacher and I find this stuff interesting. A corollary to that is the mod Enlightenment impulse, again, is always violently opposed to revealed religion. They go together. Progressives do not value handed down wisdom. They say, no, me and my intellect alone, me and my friends, we will fashion the cosmos after our liking. Some of you can see where that might lead. And some of you are getting really nervous because it sounds like I'm talking about politics. Well, you make that connection. I'm really just talking about history and philosophy, the history of philosophy, if you will. All right, maybe I'm done with that, but I honor these women. I am honored to paint these women. People who've made it to old age successfully are worthy of our deep respect. And as I understand it, at least traditional Asian culture does that well. At least I don't know, to the extent that they've been affected or infected by Western thinking, of course. That can change, but the Chinese and the Japanese do honor their elders. Very different from Western civilization, where we almost disdain the elderly. All right, I've got a couple other corrections now. All of that work was just on his nose, and I'm still afraid I'm not. His nose is still too wide. Okay, I've got to stay on his nose for a while. Indeed, his nostrils need to move closer together. This is irritating. This is the part I've portrait painting that is not so much fun. If I get real irritated, I'm going to stop this broadcast. So you don't have to watch or hear me fuss and fume. All right, you guys are chatting up, and I am missing everything. Hello, Nicholas. Thank you for your kind words. Don't know if you're still with us or not. Oh, Uncle says the grandma at the upper left looks like you overemphasized the bottom shadow on her left neck jowl. This, her left or our left? In either case, I think I'm going to stick. This part was actually made up in Photoshop. The shadow under her neck. Anyway, thanks. I'm not seeing it, but thanks for trying anyway. Who else is saying hi? Hi, Deontay Irby. Ah, good comment about Photoshop. Yeah, I agree. Danger. There's danger in the way I usually put it. Is it Deontay? Yeah, all the photomechanical tricks that we have at our disposal for learning, for getting things right, also diminish or damage, if you will, our ability to see and draw. So that's why, I don't know if you follow me very often, but that's why I strongly recommend beginning, especially a portrait, just by drawing, just copy, just no measure, no gridding, no projecting, no nothing, just draw, and then use photomechanical tricks like Photoshop, like you see me doing right now, late in the process. Because if you employ those tricks too early, I mean, if the job has to be done tomorrow, then by all means, project away. But if you can, do it the hard way first, and then employ some tricks. So that's what you see me doing here. This is late in the process, but I started out these portraits drawing, quote unquote, the old-fashioned way. Just look and draw, look and draw, look and copy. Just exercise like exercising muscles. Just exercise those copying, drawing skills. Exercise those muscles before you start using a trick like Photoshop and all the other tracing, gridding, projecting, flip chart, everything. Okay, and I use all those tricks. I use some. If you want to go a couple broadcasts ago, I in fact entitled it photomechanical tricks. Some of the tricks that I use for correcting. All right. Again, that side of his nose looks better anyway. Let's see. So I'm trying to get his nose narrowed down, because when I measure it, I clearly see that it's too wide. And I can see that without measuring too. I first discovered it just by looking. Wait, his nose looks wide. Now, many times when you say something like that, when you look at a portrait, a half unfinished portrait, or a finished one, but when you look at a portrait and you say, this or that, this looks like his head looks too long or something like that. That may be true, but at least half the time, that's not the real problem. At least half the time, it's something else that you're not seeing. Like if you feel like his head's too long, it may actually be that his head's too narrow, which gives the illusion of length, or any number of other things could be actually the problem. So that's one of the I feel like lessons you learn as you improve in portraiture is don't trust your first judgment. Just because you say, oh, his mouth looks whatever. Whatever, fill in the blank, whatever blank that is, there's more than half a chance that you're wrong. It's actually something else that is impressing you as the thing that you're mentioning, but it's actually not what is wrong. More than half the time. Or let's just say half the time. Okay, half the time you're right. At least half the time you're not right. Look at how I'm holding the brush. I mean, this just this is not good painting technique. I want you to understand that. Okay, so you beginners, this is not second half of journey painting. This is a reversion. I've reverted to first half of my art journey because in my opinion, for a real portrait, you've got to get the thing right. You've got to get it right. Okay, let's. Wait. Now this nostril over here tapers in longer. Oh, I've got one of those dreadful hard edges right here under his eye. So easy to do that. To over accentuate, to make edges too hard. So easy to do that. All right, now, phew. I hope I'm closer. I'm really getting tired of his nose. All right. Okay, so I've got the right overall dimensions. Now this, and by the way, I don't know if you noticed, I'm using a sable brush now. And it's not even a Winsor Newton Series 7. How about that? It's just a Robert Simmons. All right, whew. I'm gonna call his nose good enough for now. His eyes, I see an issue. Let's check. It looks to me like this iris is slightly larger than that one. Now, of course, you understand. Let me get a ruler over here. In fact, the best kind of ruler is one of these. Of course, I could use a ruler. It's 3/8 minus a half. Ooh, it is true. But this is actually more accurate. And if I'm afraid that I'm going to bump this, see, because it can be bumped, then this is the most accurate of all. Because this only moves if I turn the screw. This iris at the widest point versus this one. Whoa. So my intuition, if you will, is correct. Now the question is, which eye is most accurate? That answers that. This one's the iris is too narrow. Now, does that mean also that the eye is too narrow? No, the eye itself has to tear duct. No, the eye is about right. So that means the white of the eye on one side or the other, or both, is too wide. That's almost too small to measure. But the dark of this iris needs to be wider. And again, this is certainly the time when I'm going to be using a sable brush or a synthetic brush. And you all know the best sable brush ever invented on the planet is Winsor Newton Series 7. You can actually watch on YouTube a documentary about the making of Winsor Newton Series 7 brushes. It's fascinating. It made me feel even worse for all the Winsor Newton Series 7s that I had destroyed in the course of my career. Now, here's one of the dangers of using, by the way, here, you all have got to see this. Okay, so this is the moment at which I'm glad that my children are not here. Not my grandchildren, they love me, but my children. When you put on two pairs of glasses at the same time. Talk about respecting your elders, huh? I tell you, gang, I am just so thankful that I have eyes that work. I don't care if I have to put on two pairs of glasses at the same time. So here's one of the dangers of all this stuff, holding a brush in this manner. Look at, I mean, this is just horrible. Tongue painting to the max, right? I hope you understand there's a time and a place for everything. This is that time, this is that place. The danger is, though, that this brush is capable of creating absolute razor sharp edges, right? That's like its natural disposition, is to create razor sharp edges. But just because it can doesn't mean it must. So if you do what I'm doing right here, go ahead and intentionally fuzz just a tiny bit some of these lines, because they'll scream out loud. A line this sharp, an edge this sharp, will scream out loud to the viewer. Look at me, I'm a sharp edge, blah, 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 blah. That's what it'll scream, okay, got it? And you don't want that. So just because your brush can make, in its natural disposition is, in fact, yes, to make razor sharp edges, doesn't mean you have to. Okay, so use that razor sharp brush to actually fuzz some of those edges a little bit while you're doing it. All right, now his bottom eyelid right here, there's a little bit of pink that comes down on the shelf of his eyelid. The shelf is what I call the flat part. The shelf of the eye is the flat part of the bottom eyelid before the eyelashes turns down, right at the eyelash line, the bottom eyelash line. And usually that shelf is very bright and light, but in this case, for some reason, this little guy, that shelf right there is reddish, so a little bit darker than some of the surrounding flesh. So I'm going to reflect that, because that's what he looks like. Of course, just in this lighting and so on and so forth. And yes, happy to say I can make the white of his eye slightly lighter than it is. Now, this is one of the most common errors, mistakes, screw-ups that anybody can do on portraiture is make the whites of the eye too white, and make the white of the teeth too white, by the way, as well. So that's something to watch out for. Be careful, be careful, be careful. Do not make the whites too white. So the color of my brush is actually a distinctly beige tan with blue in it. Many whites of the eyes actually have blue. So be on the lookout for blue in the whites of people's eyes. It's very often the white of the eye has a bluish cast. Same thing over here. It's nice to be able to come in and lighten the whites of the eyes, because it certainly is going to make the little boy's eyes pop a little more. And again, I'm trying to be careful not to make this razor sharp. Just because I can make it razor sharp does not mean that I should. And there's a little bit of reflection over here that I really like, that violates that edge, if you will. Now, by the same token, I can make the highlight of his eye a little bit brighter. That's always, again, that's nice. It's easy to make the highlight too bright as well. Do not just dip your brush in titanium white and doink it on the eyeball for a highlight. That's a cartoon. Okay, so be careful. Don't do a cartoon highlight. The highlights in the eyes are usually somewhat soft-edged and diffuse. And anyway, just use your eyes. Don't just paint out of your imagination when you're painting eyes. Look at the photograph, or if you have the luxury of painting live, look carefully at the person's eyes and make sure that you're actually seeing it. Seeing it for what it is, not seeing it like you want it to be in your mind. That's called painting out of your filing cabinet. When you paint out of your imagination instead of painting what you actually see. The filing cabinet is the enemy of realism. It's a long lecture. I've given it many times. All right, let me back up now and look at that. This white, the white of this eye, do you see how it shadowed it is here? Let's fix that. I think I can do that with a bristle brush. There, that's better. Same thing over here, a little bit softer shadow. All right, now finally, his mouth needs a little bit of work. Let's start with the top edge of his lip. I feel like the distance between the two peaks. Let's check that. Yeah, it's okay. But it's not impressing me as correct, so let's keep working on it. I'm going to mix up some reddish pink flesh tone. By the way, one of the things that surprises me about the color of lips often, you know that they're reddish, right? But they're reddish combined with our natural flesh tone. Flesh tone is brownish, so red plus brown should equal a warm red. But in fact, when you look carefully, I can hardly explain this in the physics sense of the word. I don't understand how this works, but I know it's true. Very often, the red of our lips is actually a cool red, tending toward fuchsia, tending toward the purple end of the red. That is magenta, fuchsia, permanent rose. So don't just assume. I'm going to go back to two glasses at the same time. Don't just assume that lips are warm red. Very often, and it is true in this little boy as well. His lips are surprisingly cool red. Now I don't have quite enough dip in the middle, And all of this needs to be very soft edged. Except for, except for the top edge. That can be somewhat sharp. But all the rest of the lines down here where his mouth comes together is soft, not too hard. All right? That would be an easy mistake to make. There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay, now, use the same brush, cleanest, and do the light pink highlight of his bottom. You can see the pink highlight goes way up high, close, almost to the closing of his mouth. And here it doesn't go up high enough. Okay, and I already have some very light pink mixed up down here. 2 pairs of glasses. Be careful not to make these edges too sharp. Everything here is soft. Soft, soft, soft. Too bright, too light. Okay, easy mistake. Overdid it. It's just too bright, too light. That's the key word here. You know what? I've got too much paint. I won't be able to put anything else on. So it's time for a little rag painting. In fact, I might be able to accomplish what I want just with a rag without putting on any more paint at all. Well, bingo. No sooner said than done. All right, good. Didn't need to paint it at all. Whew. Let's see what people are saying. Hello, Monique. Yeah, I was early yesterday too, and I spoke to you at the beginning, but you missed it. Hello, Stein Oldenhoff. Yes, you are from Holland. Thank you. Monique, meet Stein. You guys are from the same part of the world, more or less. Uncle, I do usually tell my clients that they can watch. Sometimes I tell them beforehand. I have not done so here, but I will certainly tell them afterward. I will tell them to, because I know some clients have expressed great appreciation for the fun of watching me produce their painting. And I didn't do that ahead of time with this client, but I will certainly, when I send them the image, I'll say, by the way, if you want to watch me do the entire painting, this is this is the 6th, I believe, the 6th Daily Art Adventure that I've dedicated to this portrait, which is, sheesh. I seem to be getting slower at portraits, doggone it. On the other hand, there's a good trade-off. I seem to be getting better at portraits. So there you go. Not as fast as I used to be, but I think I'm better. And that's more important than fast, isn't it? Which means I'm not, not making enough money. Time is money, and when you're self-employed, I am somewhat disappointed. It's taken me 6 days to do this portrait. Yikes almighty, I didn't think it would take me nearly that long. But as I said, I think these are good portraits, so I'm proud of them. That's more important. And that means I will feel free to charge more. By the way, I'm still doing my coronavirus portrait special. The current rate is $445 per face. These people got in early, so they're not paying me quite that much, but sorry you missed it. But if you'd like me to do a portrait for you, it's $445, which is ridiculous. I mean, just please understand. That's about 1/3 or 1/4 of my normal rate. But we live in extraordinary times, and I'm willing to do extraordinary things to provide for my family. And plus, of course, I consider it all practice. I'm getting better at portraits because I've done now something like 34 of them, 35, since the beginning of the coronavirus craziness. I'm just adding a little bit of highlight all over the place right now. All right, I like that. I am happier with that face. That's always good feeling. I damaged the white of his eye up here, so let me come and fix this a little bit. You see what I'm doing here around his nose? Just scribbling with the butt end of the brush handle. Just softening, pure T softening the edge, that's all. Just like it looks. What is he doing? Scribbling, yes. And a little bit more red here. When in doubt, we'd rather have a little bit too much color than not enough. Okay, if there's a debate whether do I push the color a little bit or back off, and the answer is most of the time, generally speaking, you want to push the color, not push the values. That gets it problematic. That results in a bad looking portrait. Let's just be blunt. That results in exaggerated contrast, and exaggerated contrast does not look good, generally speaking, on a portrait. Okay, but slightly pushed color, that's another matter. I mean, as you can see, I'm being so conservative on this portrait, and that's just the way it's going to stay. I'm not going to get all brave and crazy with the color, adding blue under shadows and blah 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 blah. I mean, secondary highlights and so forth, which would be very common among portrait painters. And I've done that kind of thing a lot. We'll do it again, but not this time. Not this time. I'm just gonna. Whew, okay. Oh, I hope I'm done. Ooh, doggy. I thought I was going to be done a lot faster than that, even. But better be done well than not so well. As you can see, all the quote-unquote details from here down are much less detaily. The painting goes considerably more abstract as we go down, as it should be, because we're looking at it. I got a little pop with the tank engine train thing there, Thomas the Train, but our focus, of course, is up here. Whew. Well, let's see what other chats I've got going on. Sid the Myth says the baby should have a wider, rounder head and smoother brows. Well, I don't know if I just smoothed the brow or not. I will tell you, Sid, you might be right, but at the beginning of yesterday's broadcast, let me see if I still have this little guy. No, I don't. Okay. late in this portrait process. So I start out just by painting straight out of my head. So the position of the faces and so on and so forth is all intuitive. But late in the process, here's what I do. So I'm gonna push back a little bit, Sid. Okay, there's a photograph. It's supposed to be exactly the same size as that painting. Then I take a piece of acetate and tape it down and very carefully trace all the edges on this piece of acetate. And then I use this to test, double check, triple check. All right? So I want you to know I've already done that with this little guy. And it all checks out. Okay, so that doesn't mean that your impression that, what do you say, that the head should be wider? That's technically false. No, the head is exactly dead on. The impression you have may be coming from something else, like perhaps I carried, you know, maybe this shadow. Well, I'll go ahead because it's a maybe enough, you know, that it wouldn't hurt. Maybe that this dark shadow is cutting in a little too far, and there should be a little bit more light right here. But I want you to notice how subtle. I mean, what I'm doing right. Even what I'm doing right here, scrubby, is bad painting. Okay, this is not good painting. Even that is, like I said, it's bad painting. Anyway, Sid, I don't know if you were here a while ago when I was talking about, especially in the later stages of a portrait, we look at something and go, and we stroke our chin, we go, and then we say the eye, the nose, the mouth, the whatever feature looks a little something, blank, whatever the blank is. At least half the time we're wrong. Even me, and I'm a half decent portrait painter. I'm not trying to be falsely humble or falsely proud. I'm trying to, let me see if I can get up here where there's less glare for you guys. All right. So, that is one of the lessons about learning to do portrait, is you can't trust your eyes. And you can't trust your intuition. When you say, his nose, her mouth, her teeth, her eyes, her cheek, her nose, her whatever, looks a little blank, please understand that at least half the time you're wrong about that. Now, your impression is you probably are seeing something off. But the thing you blamed it on, the thing you labeled it, is usually, well, half the time, is not correct. That's not a scientific number, but from my experiences, I usually say at least half the time, if not more, you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I'm wrong when I make that. So I have to look 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times before I discover what actually is the problem. There usually is a problem. Anyway, but I'm going to declare, other than I've just realized I lost a shadow of this little guy's nose. Not sure how that happened. I thought I had that in at one point. Now it's dipping my brush in my black-red or red-black color here just a little bit. All right. Now I'm doing some dark stuff. Again, you can keep going down this trajectory almost forever. But you have to stop at some point, because with every fiddly little correction that you make like this, you're losing immediacy, you're losing energetic brush strokes, you're losing interesting marks and replacing them with controlled, pedantic, predictable. Okay, so you have to draw the line somewhere. And by the way, what I advocate is that everybody at some point in their career, they do at least one, maybe just one, but they do one hyper realistic or photorealistic painting. One. Now, some people, that's their whole stock and trade. That's another subject altogether. But if you're like me and you do impressionistic, or I prefer the term abstract realism, it's very definitely realistic, but the marks themselves are more important than the realism. As important as the realism is, the marks are even more important. Okay, that's, in my opinion, that's good painting. But so if you're like me in that world, but you should take some time and do one hyper realistic. So you can make it really small if you want to, and it can be of anything in the world, but you need to exercise that to make sure you've kind of checked that box off so that you're not painting loose because you're unable to paint real. Does that make sense? You don't, Impressionism is not people who can't paint realism. That's called amateur. Okay, that's called early journey painters. They paint impressionistic because they lack the chops, the skills to do real realism. So that's what you want to get over that hurdle. Say, no, 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 I'm painting this way because it's better than painting realism, not because I'm unable to paint realism. All right, I've ranted long enough, I think, and I certainly have painted long enough. Get you down. You don't have to look at the top of my head all the time. Ouch. That was, I got a pain in my shoulder. It's another story, we won't talk about it. So this painting is wet today, and I've got some slow dry here, so probably it'll be, doggone it, day after tomorrow, which will be Thursday, at least, before I can varnish this painting and then maybe deliver on Thursday or Friday, which means I won't get paid till probably Thursday or Friday, which that's an issue at my house. I'm doing this for the money. On my website, dannelsonart.com, I just rebuilt it in the last couple weeks. So it's fresh in my mind. I say on there somewhere, I say three forces have conspired to make me the artist I am today. I'm painting, so I might as well point you. Three forces have conspired to make me the artist I am today: the joy of creating, clients with deadlines, and the threat of starvation. So there you go. And what I'm referring to right now is the latter of those three, the threat of starvation. I cannot spend days, weeks, months on a painting because this is how I pay my bills. You know what? I just remembered I have a little, I just thought I was done. Phew. Okay, I might as well I could hang up, but let me keep going just for a minute. I discovered that there's, this chin needs to be lengthened a tiny bit. There we go. That didn't take too long, did it? It actually looks a little better too. I hardened the edge there just a tiny bit. Whew. All right, that's enough. Thanks for watching, y'all. Appreciate it. Enjoy your company. And I mean, I enjoyed your company is what I tried to just say. If I do anything exciting, I'll certainly start another broadcast. But I think I'm done painting for the day. I've got other things, infrastructure to do. As an artist, there's always infrastructure. Not the least of which, by the way, is photographing this painting. That's a whole scientific process, quote unquote, and photographing it, editing it in Photoshop. I'll end up with somewhere between a 60 and a 90 megabyte file, JPEG. No, Photoshop or TIFF file, which when reduced as a JPEG will end up roughly at a 30 megabyte, just for those of you who care about and understand such terminology. So a pretty big file. You know, I'll take probably four pictures of this, mash them together in Photoshop, and again, as a Photoshop file, it'll be a 60 to 90 megabyte file, pretty big, and then switch it to JPEG and post it online. All right, thanks for your company again. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.